and he was making his routine rounds. His job was to walk around the complex at night, or early in the morning or whatever, and make sure everything looked kosher, because people lived there, they needed security. There were office buildings there, so he was walking around making his routine rounds, and he came across a door that was leading into the building's parking garage, and he noticed it had tape around its latch to keep it open, right? So you know how a door locks? Somebody had pushed that so it would stay open and put tape around it so they could access in and out of the parking garage without a key. Well, your parking garage needs to be secure, because when you park in a, you know, if you live in the apartment complex and you park in the parking lot and you use your key or whatever to get into the building. So that's pretty important. So early in the morning on June 17, 1972, a security guard by the name of Frank Wills is walking around making his routine rounds, and he comes across this back door that goes into the building's parking garage, and he finds tape across the latch, leaving it accessible to anyone. Well, what did he do? He called the police. And what they did is they came to the Watergate building and they searched the building to see what was going on, because that's a crucial part. When you rent a building in a big city, you don't want everybody to have access from the parking garage in. A lot of these buildings, they have kind of like we have out here. You have to buzz in to get in, and they have security at the front of the building, and it's a big deal. So when he saw that door taped open, he called the police, and they arrived and searched the building. Well, one of the offices that were rented in the Watergate building was rented by the Democratic National Committee. Okay, and what does the Democratic National Committee do? They try to get their candidate what? Elected president. So that's where they do their work, okay? That's where they're building strategy. That's where they have files they don't want the opposite party to see, and those types of things. And so when the police arrived, they went to the 6th floor of the Watergate building, and they found 5 men inside the office that was rented by the Democratic National Committee. Caught them in there without permission. So the police arrive, they search the building, they get on the 6th floor, and they go into this office that's rented by the Democratic National Committee, and they find 5 guys in there. And you know what they find in their possession? Tools for picking locks and electronic bugging devices. That's what they find on their possession. Okay? They find tools to pick locks. That's how they got into the office. And they were caught with electronic bugging devices. So what did they do with them when they caught them? Yeah, arrested them and took them to jail, the police headquarters. And what they do, just like they did to Lee Harvey Oswald, they put him in the put him in the police car outside the theater. What did they do? Well, what did they do too? What did they find on it? What they do is they searched them, okay? And when they were taken back to police headquarters during the arrest and searched, an address book was taken from one of the 5 men. Now, you guys don't have address books anymore because you got cell phones that you put all your contacts in. But these were very common, little books about this big that fit in your back pocket or front pocket, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and you'd write down people's names and addresses in these little black books. You've probably seen them, okay? Well, they found one of these address books, small address books, on one of these 5 men. And what'd they do then? They looked in the address book, right? And they found the name of a person by the name of G. Gordon Liddy. G. Gordon Liddy's name and phone number was in the address book. So the address book contained the name of G. Gordon Liddy. So what? This is a Democratic National Committee headquarters, right, at Watergate. And they find these guys in there. They search them and find this address book on one of them. And one of the contacts in the address book is G. Gordon Liddy. Well, it just so happens that G. Gordon Liddy was a senior member of the White House staff and the chairman of the committee to re-elect the president. Okay? So G. Gordon Liddy, who's in this address book, turns out to be one of the one of the chief members of the White House staff, and also he's got the title of chairman to re-elect the president. Does that look very good?
No.
Well, when the White House heard about this, they just dismissed the whole incident as a, quote, third-rate burglary. What does that mean? Didn't have anything to do with them, just a bunch of losers in there trying to steal something, I guess, burglarize this office. We don't know anything about it. So the White House dismissed the whole incident, even though G. Gordon Liddy's name was in that person's contacts. They tried to dismiss it as a third-rate burglary. Well, during these months after Nixon was re-elected, reports began to unravel and unravel and unravel. And in 1973, the government became actively investigating this break-in. And this investigation that happened in 1963 by the government became known as the Watergate Investigations. So what happens is this thing continues to snowball during the months after Nixon's re-election. A lot of criminal activity seems to come about that may reach even the highest political offices in the country. And so in 1973, the government starts to investigate this whole thing that started with this break-in. And this investigation goes down in American history as the Watergate Investigation. So we'll back up a little bit and kind of tell you the story. So we're going to move on to this little subtopic, which is the trial of 5 men. They're going to try these 5 men for breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate apartment complex. They're trying them. They've been arrested, they've been put in jail, and now they're going to try them. Now the judge that's going to try these 5 men is John J. Sirica. John J. Sirica. And he's the guy that's going to be the judge in this trial. Judge J. Sirica. John J. Sirica, excuse me. And it starts in March of 1973. Now these judges, if you ever watch Judge Judy, they get a lot of time to kind of study up the case before it goes to trial. And Sirica just doesn't believe this break-in at the Democratic National Headquarters is a minor third-rate burglary. He just doesn't believe it after putting everything together. And so what he does is he's going to put a bunch of pressure, tremendous pressure, on these 5 men that were arrested to tell who's really behind you guys being in there. This isn't some third-rate burglary where you 5 knuckleheads were just in there looking for something. You weren't stealing watches or whatever, pens. You were in there for a reason. So Sirica really puts the pressure on him. How's he put pressure on him? How's he trying to break him to get the truth? Is he torturing them with, little razor blade cuts? You can't do that. What's he going to threaten them with? A long, tough sentence is exactly right. And finally, one of the men breaks and agrees to talk if Sirica promises him he will not get a long sentence. So one of the men starts to break. He doesn't want a long sentence. And his name was James McCord. James McCord is one of the 5 men that's going to blow the whistle because he's afraid of a long sentence. The other actually kept their mouths shut pretty well. So finally one of the men broke down and agreed to talk after Judge Sirica had threatened a long sentence. And here are the 4 things that James McCord told Judge Sirica. 4 things he told him. Number 1, McCord told Sirica that those 5 men were paid hush money just to plead guilty and vow their silence in this matter. So McCord disclosed to Sirica that these 5 men were offered hush money, money to be quiet, if they would just plead guilty and vow their silence. Okay, so they were going to take their penalty, but they were going to be paid handsomely for doing so, and don't say anything. That's one thing he told them. And just vowed their silence. In other words, I'll plead guilty, serve my time. When I get out of jail, I'll never tell anybody ever what happened. Okay? Another thing that McCord told Sirica is that obviously, I think you could figure this out, some of those men lied during their testimony. Okay? These guys weren't telling you the truth. These other 4 guys they were lying. So he discloses that the other men were lying during their testimony. He also told Judge Sirica that there were other people involved in this break-in who still remain unnamed. Okay? There were other people involved in this break-in that remained to that point unnamed. Still some out there. And probably the shocker was he told Sirica that the committee to re-elect the president was behind the break-in. That's why G. Gordon Liddy's name was in that fellow's address book. He said that the committee to re-elect the president was behind the break-in. Well, after McCord testified, the 5 men went to trial, and he passed sentence on each of the 5 men. And obviously, he gave McCord a little less than the others, but not a lot. Okay? He was banking on the part, if you don't tell me, it's kind of like if you screw up and you tell me the truth, I'll punish you the minimum. But if you lie to me, I'm going to crush you. That's kind of what he told those guys. Well, let's talk about the committee to re-elect the president. Okay, let's talk about that. Who was the chairman of that committee? G. Gordon Liddy. Now they had a chairman of the committee and they had a director of the committee. And G. Gordon Liddy was the chairman of the committee to re-elect the president, and former Attorney General John Mitchell was named director of the committee to re-elect the president. So you had another influential name in that committee. A former Attorney General of the United States by the name of John Mitchell was director of the committee to re-elect the president, and G. Gordon Liddy was the chairman. Now it's kind of interesting because just a couple of days after the break-in, Mitchell resigned as director of the committee to re-elect the president. Just a couple of days after the break-in, ironically, John Mitchell, who was the director of the committee to re-elect the president, decided he would step down. Well, this got to be a lot of finger pointing, because who's the heat on first? G. Gordon Liddy. He reminds everyone that former Attorney General John Mitchell, was the director. And then when people started to point fingers at Mitchell, he attempted to shift the burden to a White House lawyer by the name of John Dean. See on the back of your sheet there? There's Mitchell and Dean. So when fingers began to point at Mitchell, he pointed his fingers to the White House lawyer, a guy by the name of John Dean. So G. Gordon Liddy points the finger at John Mitchell points the finger at John Dean. Well, then John Dean points the finger at 2 other people, H.R. Haldeman and John Ehrlichman. They were Nixon's closest advisors in the White House. So when John Dean gets fingers pointed at him, then he points fingers at H.R. Haldeman and John Ehrlichman. Both of those guys were Nixon's closest advisors in the White House. Well, officials started getting interested in this. The Nixon administration started accusing each other and pointing fingers like crazy. And finally, when more investigation was done, it was revealed that 3 key governmental agencies had improperly been used by the White House in the election of 1972. So not only did they find out about this break-in, they find out that 3 key governmental agencies had been improperly used by the White House during the election. Nixon said, do whatever it takes to get me reelected. Well, his aides went to the extent of using 3 government agencies to get information to help Nixon win. Which 3 government agencies did they use illegally? FBI, CIA, and the one you really don't want mad at you, especially April 15th or later,
IRS.
the IRS. So Nixon's aides had used the FBI, the CIA, and the IRS to gather information that would help Nixon win the election of 1972. It got so bad that the director of the FBI, L. Patrick Gray, resigned when it was revealed that he had burned files relating to Watergate. So I mean, I'll tell you what, everybody in Nixon's inner circle is getting pumped up for this. They're all pointing fingers like crazy. They find out that these aides, not sure which ones exactly, use the FBI, CIA, and IRS to gather information against the Democratic Party in this re-election. And now, FBI Director L. Patrick Gray resigns when it's revealed publicly that he had actually burned files related to Watergate. So, the last thing we'll talk about today might be the most important, which is what? What? All this stuff's happening under Nixon's watch, so what might you want to know? What's Nixon's reaction to this, okay? What's the president's reaction to Watergate? He's hearing the same thing. He knows about the break-in. He knows about the trial. He knows about all this finger-pointing. He knows that Gray resigned. What's his reaction? What did he do first? He didn't even deny it. He did what? It wouldn't comment on it. Yeah, no comment. So when he was first pressed about what he knew about Watergate, he simply would not comment. He refused to comment. Well, finally, after so much pressure, what do you got to do? Yeah, so what he did is he was forced to speak on the issue. So how did he do it? How did he speak? With who? Big time. He addressed the nation, not just a press conference with the press. He chose on the night of April 30th, 1973, to address the entire nation about Watergate. Because it was getting too hot. Okay? All these things were coming out, and everybody's wondering, what's the president think about this? He just ignores it, doesn't answer it. Pretty soon the pressure gets so bad that he's going all the way, baby. He's going to have a presidential address of the nation, and he does it on April 30th, 1973, and he basically states two things. States two things in his address. To the nation, not to the press. Brianna makes a good point. You'd think maybe just have a press conference. See, this guy went and told the whole country. Okay? First thing he told the American people was that the Watergate episode was a very unfortunate situation. Very unfortunate. He tells the American people that the Watergate episode is very unfortunate. And the second thing he does is he announces to the American nation that both Haldeman and Ehrlichman were going to resign their positions in his administration. They were his two closest aides. And he tells the American people that both are going to resign, Haldeman and Ehrlichman. And that's all he says. And what are people wondering? What do you know? Well, he just left it at that, and finally the pressure got again big, and finally a month later, towards the end of May of '73, he issued a statement. That's where you just issue a statement. You don't even have a press conference, you just issue a statement to the media. And he issued a statement that he had no knowledge of any kind of this activity at the Watergate apartment complex. He said he absolutely knew nothing about it. And he made that statement a month after his speech in late May of 1973. Finally, couldn't get away from it any longer, and he stated that he had absolutely no knowledge of what happened at the Watergate apartment complex. Well, let's leave with this thought. Is that going to hold water? So what group is going to have to take some action to figure out what happened? What group? Which part? You're right. Which side? Actually, the Senate. Okay? So the Senate is going to be forced to take action because there's too much attention about this scandal and the controversy. So they're going to have to do something. And so What we'll talk about tomorrow is the Senate took action to begin what was known as the Watergate Hearings. And this is going to be quite a thing. Nationally televised and the whole works. But you'll be surprised. Somebody had to start this ball off. It had to be somebody in the Senate that started this ball rolling. Guess who it was? We talked about. Which senator got the ball rolling in Watergate? Senator Mike Mansfield of Montana was the man that got the ball started to get these Watergate hearings going. Okay? All right, perfect.
Sir,
Yes,
do you have any handouts for me?
I do. I do, yes. And they're actually right back here.